YouTube, what's good? It's your boy Hold It Down Jay. And I know y'all miss my ass. Anyways, before we even begin, I'm gonna need y'all to like, share, subscribe, and comment after the video because feedback is love and that means better content for y'all. Well, it's a lot of things I gotta update y'all on, especially with machine learning and data science whole thing as far as data manipulation and cleanup. And I'm gonna get into all that. But of course, I gotta let my theme song play because you know that's me, right? So after this, I'ma holla at y'all. YouTube, thank y'all for tuning back in, man. Like I said, I'm Hold It Down Jay. For those who don't know, I gotta talk to y'all, man, and I gotta tell y'all exactly what I learned, but I gotta tell y'all exactly my thought process with it and how I felt. It's been very mentally draining trying to learn all this. I'm not gonna lie. Working a full-time job and trying to be a family man and also, try to do your day-to-day job, it can be very stressful. I want you to be aware of that. Some things I wish I would have known before I actually starting this course to better prepare myself, but it's all good. I'm not here to complain, but I just want to give you all the real spill. The reason why it's been so overwhelming is because this course is very heavy in Python. If you never played with Python before, you in for a ride. I'm telling you, it's a lot of things, a lot of programming. Even though it has been overwhelming with a lot of material and everything, I'm still learning and I'm still enjoying it because once I figure out the problem, I'm like, oh, a light bulb happens, right? Nevertheless, let's go ahead and get into what I learned, and I'm gonna give you a little brief summary of everything that I learned so far. The first thing we're gonna talk about is Python. Yes, the first section is pretty much data manipulation and data cleaning. And this portion plays a part when it comes to teaching you how to do Python, also SQL database. I know some of you may not know exactly what that entails. Pretty much, Python is a general purpose programming language. What that specifically means is that it has versatility. It can be used for multiple things. And within these projects that I've done, I've learned a lot and I've done a lot of projects so far. And this is just the one section out of the remaining 5. Now, one thing you'll learn is you'll use different libraries within Python. So when it comes to Python, Python contains these things called libraries. Well, a lot of coding does, but Python contains libraries. Think of libraries as a toolbox. Within this toolbox has different pre-written code that you can use to help your experience with getting what you need to get done a lot faster. They'll have a lot of packages and modules. Another thing I want to bring up about toolbox for Python libraries, you have to understand how to use your tools efficiently, but the way you do that is by knowing the basic terms when it comes to Python or any programming language. For example, when I was learning Python, I learned what list was. I also learned what key value pairs was within dictionaries, also variables. Variables are pretty much used for storing information, and lists is used for order collection items, and dictionaries are pretty much for key value pairs. And this comes into play for organizing data. Now, the first Python library that they threw at me was NumPy. NumPy is an effective library because it allows processing for mathematical equations to be much more efficient if you use that exact library. It's a very popular one in the game, and so far I've been using it. It's been helping out a lot with my mathematical equations. Building on top of NumPy, you have another library called Pandas. If you're talking about data analysis, this is your go-to library. It introduces a structure called a data frame. The way you could think of a data frame is like a grid or either a table. It's great for working with structured data that isn't large or massive, I should say. Now that I told you 2 of those libraries, I need to tell you the distinction between the 2. Yes, Pandas is used for data analysis, but you have to understand when it comes to Pandas, Pandas has the underlying structure of NumPy. NumPy is the engine that runs Pandas. That's how efficiently the mathematical equations run smoothly. Now, the next library I want to talk about is Matplotlib. The reason why this library is probably the one I've had the most fun with so far because it's one of those libraries that you can use to visualize data. If you have a structured set of data, but you want to put it actually on a grid or show it like you used to do back in 5th grade, and show X and Y coordinate plots, this is the library for you. It can show statistics, and this is where it comes into play when it comes to determining the weather, or whether or not if you want to see financial gains within the company. Matplotlib is a great tool to use. With this tool, I made line plots, scatter plots, bar charts, anything you can name. It's been pretty awesome. But while it's been very awesome, I must caution you and just let you know, the more points you put on the graph, the slower it's going to run. So be very careful on how much data you ingest inside that graph. Now, moving away from Python, the next thing I learned was SQL database. SQL stands for Structured Query Language. SQL is mainly used when it comes to relational databases. For those who don't know what relationship database is, let me go ahead and tell you. An easy way to think of relationship database is pretty much stored values organized in rows and columns, and they have some relationship to each other within data points. That's the easiest way I could put it. Now, when it comes to SQL, you have to understand they're organized into columns and rows. And when these columns and rows have data points that are related to each other, they create something what is called a table. Now, you might be curious, what if I wanted to analyze or query data without actually having a full-blown database server? This is where DuckDB comes into play, or Duck Database. DuckDB essentially wraps a SQL database and allows it to be used with our local files. I want you to understand, when it comes to SQL databases, they are very structured, and pretty much they have rows and columns, and it's in a specific certain way. Now, I want you to understand that not all databases are created the same. And the reason why I say that is because if you take a look at something called MongoDB or Mongo database, it has a flexible way that allows you to store data in something called a document database. You ever hear somebody say, I want to query a document store? That's pretty much saying that retrieving the data, filtering it, and searching to find exactly the data that you're looking for. And unlike SQL databases, they don't rely on rigid table structures and etc. And the last thing I learned was website scraping. Website scraping is pretty much an automated process retrieving data from a website. The reason why you retrieve it from a website is because sometimes information from databases aren't readily available as quick as you need it. Website scraping has tons of uses. You can use it for market research, price monitoring, and you can use it to gather news from public sources, to gather more information, of course. All right, y'all, now that we coming to a close, I'm gonna give y'all a little summary we talked about. We talked about Python, how you gotta actually know your simple terms like your variables, which is store information, also your lists and your dictionaries for key value pairs and etc. And then we moved on to the relational databases, which is SQL Server, and we also went over DuckDB, so you could wrap SQL databases into it to use instead of using a whole SQL database server. And this is usually good when you have your local data, okay? And then now moving on, we talked about NumPy, we talked about pandas for data analysts, and also for mathematical equations. That's where NumPy pretty much gave you that power for efficiency. And then I told you about my favorite project as far as visualizing data with Matplotlib, and how the more plots you have, the slower your script can run. So be careful with that. And then we talked about web scraping as far as extracting data from public sources and how it can be useful for you. And we talked about some other things too, but you know, this is the closing. It's not supposed to be that heavy, you know what I mean? So thank you so much. I appreciate y'all. Go ahead and leave a comment in the chat below. Let me know if y'all like it or not, or you know, some things y'all want me to talk about. All right, I'm gonna holla at y'all.